teaching, and we're in our second year. We're in our first year of AVID and just getting ready for our second year, which is trying to engage all of our kids in that higher level coursework. One of the cool things about being in high school is you have lots of clubs. And so kids are involved in a wide range of activities. We have a lot of service clubs, which I'm really proud of, and I don't know if the other schools do, they probably do. But our Kiwanis associated group is Key Club, and they run 2 blood drives during the year. They've raised a lot of money for Children's Hospital this year, and so just seeing kids engaged in community service is really inspiring. We also have a specialty club called Loyalty. It's by application. Seniors only, so kids are very competitive about getting into this club. But this club actually just put signs all around our school. They're pretty inspiring if you go by. They have signs that say, you know, your actions don't define you, and you're worthy of love, and don't give up. And they have them posted everywhere for kids to see. And one of the parents wrote a nice note to the teacher saying how impressed she was with that, and that all kids need to feel safe at school. So that was one of the things they do. They also do a huge food drive in December. You've probably been around Kirkland and seen them raising money out there and food. We also have a Latino club that's around college bound, so our advisors make sure that the kids have experiences around what does college look like, how do you maneuver the different problems that come up and barriers that might come up around college. Just lately, they went to SPU. They've also been to the University of Washington and met with their Hispanic outreach students. Coming up, we have a parent night with an outreach specialist from Edmonds Community College. And then all my parents over here, past parents, future parents, we're really fortunate to have an amazing PTSA. And one of the ways that our PTSA supports us is by running these college application workshops. And what they do is in the fall, they meet with seniors and help them with their essays and help them with their applications. So they give them feedback, they do the grammar checks, they do whatever kids need them to do in order to get these essays going. And then in the spring, they meet with juniors and sophomores and give them different ideas about college. So some of the ones they've done is 20 ways to choose your college majors, cool colleges from coast to coast and beyond. Good one for parents, affordable colleges. You might be surprised. And those kinds of things. And so we're really fortunate to have our PTSA actually engaging in the education program of the students and not only providing us the monetary support to run programs. And so in closing, our big motto is once a Kang, always a Kang. And as the oldest high school in the district, we know that our community comes from a long line of Kangs. And so we're really excited to have that as part of our legacy. Thank you very much. Any questions? Or?
Thank you so much for the presentation tonight, Christina. I just want to highlight the fact that when you're closing opportunity and achievement gaps, that takes a lot of effort. As you as an administrative team, and I know your teachers have been deeply engaged in looking at data, analyzing their practices in the classroom, and so it doesn't go unnoticed, and thank you for sharing the Lake Washington story tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was fabulous to hear all the stories and the incredible increase in your graduation rates. It's fabulous. Great job. We will. All right, so our next step now, we do have 4 proclamations, and we have different board members who will be reading them. So first, I'd like to start with Director Stewart, who will be doing the Teacher Appreciation Week.
Whereas teachers mold future citizens through guidance and education and keep American democracy alive by laying the foundation for good citizenship, and whereas teachers encounter students of widely differing backgrounds and our country's future depends upon providing quality education to all students, and whereas Lake Washington School District teachers work to create learning environments that support the district's guiding principles of connection, value, and challenge, and whereas the teachers of Lake Washington School District deserve recognition for their hard work to help students achieve the district's vision of every student future ready, therefore we, the Lake Washington School Board of Directors do hereby proclaim May 6th through 12 and Tuesday, May 8th as Teacher Appreciation Week and National Teacher Day in Lake Washington School District.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Our next one is for School Nurse Day, done by Director Sage.
Whereas today, children face more complex and life-threatening health problems requiring care in school, and whereas all students have the right to have their health needs met safely while in the school setting, and whereas school nurses understand the link between health and learning and are in a position to make a positive difference for children every day, and whereas school nurses have served a critical role in improving public health and in ensuring student academic success for more than 100 years, and whereas school nurses are professional nurses who advance the well-being, academic success, and lifelong achievements of all students by serving on the front lines and providing a critical safety net for our nation's most fragile children. Therefore, we, the members of the Lake Washington School District Board of Directors, do hereby proclaim Wednesday, May 9th, 2018, as School Nurse Day.
Thank you. And next we have Director LaLiberty doing School Nutrition Employee Week.
Okay. Whereas nutritious meals at school are an essential part of the school day, and whereas the staff members who prepare and serve school meals help nurture our children through their daily interaction and support, and whereas the staff of the district's Nutrition Services Department are committed to providing healthful, nutritious meals to the district's children, and whereas the Lake Washington School District has partnered with Sodexo to provide students with nutritious meal options for more than 35 years, therefore we, the members of the Lake Washington School District Board of Directors, do hereby proclaim the week of May 7 through 11, 2018 as School Nutrition Employee Week in Lake Washington School District.
All right, thank you. And lastly, our fourth one, which I will read, is Arts and Education Month. Something that is very important, as all the others, to which to increase our creativity. And thank you to our presentation tonight talking about all the arts that were done. So, whereas the arts, including dance, music, theater, and visual arts, are defined as a core subject in Washington State's definition of basic education and considered an essential component of the complete and balanced education for all students, and whereas learning in and through the arts enables students to develop critical thinking and problem-solving skills, imagination and creativity, discipline, alternative ways to communicate and express feelings and ideas, and cross-cultural understanding, which supports academic success across the curriculum as well as personal growth outside the classroom. And whereas imagination and creativity are increasingly understood as critical capacities needed for success in the 21st century workforce, and whereas the arts can transform our schools into havens of creativity and exploration, places where students want to learn, teachers want to teach, and all members of the learning community are more engaged and motivated. And therefore, we, the members of the Lake Washington School District Board of Directors, do hereby proclaim the month of May 2018 as Arts in Education Month. And that is it. So now we will be moving on to public comment. And I do have some people signed up. I'd like to first start to give some directions really quickly. So on a monthly basis, the Board of Directors does give an opportunity for public comment during our board meetings. And public comment period is a time reserved during our work meeting for the board to hear from the public. As always, there are multiple avenues to contact us. You can do it through coming to a meeting. You could also email, you could call, or letters even. So please note that public comment is not a public question and answer session with the board. The board and superintendent will not respond to community members during public comment, as our goal is to listen and to learn from you. When your name is called, please approach the podium and speak into the microphone, giving your full name and school attendance area for the record. And we have a stoplight system that will show a yellow light when you have 1 minute left, and red will signify that your 3 minutes are over. And it is important for all our communities to feel welcome and safe during the board's business meeting, so the board does not take public comments on issues related to personnel or individually named staff at board meetings. Audience members are expected to treat all attendees with respect and civility. And the first person I have signed up tonight to address the board is Melissa Stone. So will you please come forward to the center microphone, give us your name and school attendance area for the record. Thanks.
Hi, thank you. My name is Melissa Stone, and I'm part of the Lake Washington Learning Community. Just want to say hello to Dr. Holman and the rest of the school board members this evening. I am the VP of Advocacy for the Lake Washington PTSA Council, and thank you for letting me take a few minutes this evening. And I want to talk to you about the Lake Washington PTSA Council overwhelmingly passing a resolution on gun violence prevention and school safety resolution on Thursday, May 3rd this week. This comes at a time when school boards, local cities, and other PTSAs have come up with gun and school safety resolutions of their own, and we did this after feedback from our membership. We felt that we needed to make a statement and be part of the conversation that impacts students and families in our community. In addition to calling out support of common gun sense legislation, there are a couple of points that I thought might be of particular interest to you, including that the Lake Washington PTSA Council supports the efforts of the district to increase safety measures to better protect the district students, teachers, and staff. This includes establishing safety programs in schools that do not include arming educators and staff. This is in line with survey data from the National Education Association that showed that nearly 75% of educators do not support arming teachers. In addition, the Lake Washington PTSA Council supports increasing funding for programs and school staffing that support student mental, social, and emotional learning and anti-bullying. A question that sometimes comes to me from people is, why is the PTSA getting involved with this? And the bottom line is that the PTA started as a grassroots advocacy organization over 100 years ago. And this fits in with our mission to be a strong advocate for the well-being and education for all students. The resolution also reflects the longstanding resolutions of the National PTA as well. So we look forward to continue working with the district. We wanted to share with you what was going on. And so I have a copy for Diane to share with you, and then I'll email you guys as well. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your sharing the copy. Our next person we have is Taina Karu Olson. And I apologize if I mispronounced your name.
It's good. All right. Hi, my name is Taina Karu Olson, and I live in the Lake Washington Learning Community. In March, I spoke to you about my daughter and how her education shows what's possible for disabled students in Lake Washington School District. Today, I would like to speak about one of the main reasons why my daughter's experience with inclusive education in the district isn't a universal one. I would like to address one of the main barriers to meaningful inclusion. I'd like to talk to you about the legal concept of the least restrictive environment and the spirit of the legislation we now know as IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. The spirit of the law is clear and its intent strong, but there's an escape clause built into it, a loophole that is widely in use. And my mission today is to have us reflect on and rethink what is more important: respecting students and offering them a real future, allowing them equal opportunity to become as future-ready as their non-disabled counterparts, or staying minimally compliant and exploiting a remnant of a different time, a time in which my daughter would likely have been institutionalized. The kind of implementation of LRE we today know is possible for all disabled students, regardless of the perceived severity of their support needs, is to be fully and meaningfully included with their same-age non-disabled peers in general education classrooms with integrated and flexible supports and services, so they can belong, learn, and be full participants in their classroom communities. Indeed, this is legally supported, evidence-based best practice that results in better outcomes for everyone. But this is not the implementation of LRE that happens in reality, not to most students anyway. If these students aren't early on confined to segregated programs for all or most of their day, they are pushed out of the system to be homeschooled because the parents simply cannot afford, mentally or financially, the required consumer response, a due process. Or the parents choose to spend their money on a private school rather than facing off with attorneys in meeting rooms. This is everyday reality for many of us. It keeps us awake at night. And it seems incredible that it should be so when the spirit of IDEA is clear and its intent strong. For disabled students, human rights to be respected. Thank you.
Thank you. And so our next person we have is Marija Bojic. I apologize as well.
Don't worry. You had two in one go. It's not easy. So hi, my name is Maria Bogic. I live in the Juanito Learning Community, and my daughter attends Sandberg Elementary. Currently, the requirements for non-disabled children to enroll in kindergarten in this district, as well as nationally, are that they be residents in the district and of the right age. And that's it. They don't have to qualify in any other way. They just have to be of the right age and exist at the right address. For disabled kids, like my daughter, the story unfolds in a very different way. They get evaluated. There's a big discussion that's supposed to be about supports and success, but really is about where they will go to school, whether they will be awarded any access to the general education environment at all, whether they can be normal enough to be allowed in, whether they qualify as non-disabled enough, indistinguishable enough to be with their rightful peers. All too often, disabled kids are expected to qualify for meaningful inclusion when they have already qualified simply by being human. The intensity of support needs is confused with a place, a segregated location, leaving disabled students faced with a threat of even further marginalization that will have lifelong consequences. Today, following almost 40 years of compelling research evidence, we know that everyone, all students, non-disabled and disabled, benefits from general education and can successfully participate in general education with the appropriate supplementary aids and services in place. Qualifying for inclusion is a thing of the past, antiquated practice, and qualifying for supplementary aids and services is what we should concern ourselves with instead. Students do not have to leave the general education classroom to be taught and supported sufficiently. The services and supports can and should be seamlessly integrated into general education environment. Everyone can learn together and meaningfully belong. And if we truly strive for all students to be future ready in Lake Washington School District, meaningful inclusion is an essential factor for any individual's future and a fundamental pillar for a diverse society that accepts, respects, and values all of its members, regardless of how divergent they may be. Separate is not equal. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Could I just ask that the last two speakers, if you're comfortable leaving your notes with Diane so that we can have, or email them to us so that we could have a copy? No. Thank you.
Thank you. And so our next person is Bob Yoder.
I'm Bob Yoder from the Redmond Learning Community, and if you heard my cough back there, I apologize. Hello, Dr. Holman and Board of Directors. Nice to see you. This is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I wanted to talk about it a little bit. What I'm going to say, most of the sources of my talk are the National Institute of Mental Health, NAMI, and the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, also known as DSM. I want to correct an error I made earlier once with other people, that autism is a psychiatric illness. It isn't, from the research I've done later. At best, one may consider it a complex brain disorder. The DSM, which guides psychiatrists in the treatment of mental health conditions, says the severity, quote, "the severity of autism spectrum is based on communication impairment and restricted repetitive patterns of behavior. A family that we know with a severely impaired child had to move to Texas to live with their child during extensive treatment. The American Academy of Pediatricians recommends screening by the age of 2. So it's developmental and pretty, okay. So according to the DSM, medication can treat both autism and ADHD. Kids with ADHD may have a hard time focusing on assignments and be hard to teach, but many have a above average IQ. 1/3 of the symptoms of ADHD extend into adulthood. Many personality disorders like conduct disorder, borderline disorder, and oppositional defiant disorder are in the DSM. Some truant children cope with anxiety and depression. Sometimes these students stay at home to help their parents who have mental illness themselves. The Truancy Board works with Youth Eastside Services counselors, nurses, and social workers to keep the marginally impaired students out of court. Amazingly, 1/2 of all chronic mental health illnesses occur by 8th grade. Some examples of chronic illnesses are major depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, OCD, and some other forms of anxiety. Youth Eastside Services just hired 2 child psychiatrists to help these children. As we talk more about mental illness with our friends, teachers, and parents, we start to remove the stigma of mental illness in schools and in our families. As a result, parents are more likely to take their kids to a doctor. I have a mood disorder and ADHD and find a great way to talk about it by using less emotionally charged words. Could I just finish? Okay. I encourage your constituents and parents to casually discuss mental health with your students. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who didn't sign up who would like to address the board? All right, well, thank you very much. Many of these issues will be followed up on through, right, so I would hope we will hear a little more about inclusion and least restrictive environment would be helpful in a board brief coming forward. Go ahead.
Bob, have you already emailed that to us as the board?
Yeah.
Your statement?
You can have a comment.
Okay, thank you.
I'll email it, yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, so then moving on, we will go to the consent agenda, and I will now entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Move approval.
So moved. Oh, I couldn't hear you. I'm
That's
moving.
all right. You can have it. Second.
It has been moved by Director La Liberty and seconded by Director Carlson. Dr. Holman, will you now pull the board?
Cassandra,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Siri,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Chris.
Yes.
Oh, we went through them all. Okay, so Dr. Holman, will you now review the donations, please?
I absolutely will. We have an astounding $107,925.57 of donations this evening. First, Lake Washington Schools Foundation to Lake Washington School District in the amount of $4,501.45 to purchase musical instruments. Audubon Elementary PTSA to Audubon Elementary in the amount of $3,877.15 to provide stipend for choir and to support intramural sports programs. Elizabeth Blackwell PTSA to Blackwell Elementary in the amount of $10,836.62 to purchase classroom supplies, laptops for special education, walkie-talkies, a medicine cabinet, and to support field trips. Margaret R. Kawana and Bradley Schmidt to Lakeview Elementary in the amount of $1,259.20 to support field trips. Mark Twain PTSA to Twain Elementary in the amount of $72,352 to purchase playground equipment. Inglewood Middle School PTSA to Inglewood Middle in the amount of $1,320 to purchase graphing calculators. Stella Scola PTO to Stella Scola in the amount of $3,700 to provide classroom enrichment, extra help, and to support field trips. And Washington DECA to Eastlake High School in the amount of $1,680 to provide extracurricular activity scholarships. The Juanita Rebels Booster Club to Juanita High School in the amount of $3,355.15 to purchase track and field equipment. Lake Washington High School Cross Country Track Booster Club to Lake Washington High School in the amount of $1,144 to purchase pole vaults. The Lake Washington Girls Soccer to Lake Washington High School in the amount of $2,575 to purchase sports uniforms. And lastly, the Redmond High School PTSA to Redmond High School in the amount of $1,325 to support Invest Ed.
All right, thank you very much, and thank you to our community for their generosity in supporting our students in schools and the important work that occurs. So for our next item, we are on to our non-consent agenda. And the first item on our non-consent is approval of the monitoring report for EL7 academic program.
Excellent. And so we bring this executive limitation to the board tonight. You have seen this previously. We bring it to you for approval. I do want to point out a few key pieces in the executive limitation. On page 1 of the report, you'll see that we identify this area as in compliance, and you'll see our little indicator has an uptick. That means that this is an area where we've changed from partial compliance to in compliance. And as you know, EL7 is an extremely rich report, which you've had the chance to read. But in this area, in Area 1, it is to develop and implement an academic program that specifies academic content and technology standards that meet or exceed state and nationally recognized model standards, curriculum aligned with and designed to enable students to meet or exceed the established standards, assessments that will adequately measure each student's progress toward achieving the standards, and lastly, a compelling and realistic vision of technology that specifies technology use and integration of technology. So this first area on the executive limitation is in compliance, which is a change this year. Additionally, I want to point out that number 4 of EL7 is now in compliance, which is also a change from last year. That is page 32 on the report. And this is just that it ensures that all instructional programs are regularly evaluated and modified as necessary to assure their continuing effectiveness. And the evidence there focuses on the special services program review, the intervention program review that was conducted a couple years ago. We're currently in the middle of a middle school honors review and conducted our core academic summer school program review. Also want to point out in this EL, number 5 continues to be in partial compliance, and that is due to the instructional minutes in PE for our elementary program. And so that is kind of the highlights on EL7.
Okay, before I open it up to discussion, I just wanted to give a little update. We're on the executive limitations for a piece of it. As you know, each year from March to August, we monitor all 13 of our executive limitations, and these are our policies that state the limitations imposed by the board on the strategies and methods the superintendent and his or her staff may use as they work to achieve the specified outcomes identified in our ends results policies that we just finished monitoring. The executive limitations establish the boundaries and operating expectations for staff. So as discussed at our extended work session in March, the board plans to review, revise, and update the executive limitations to align with the current environment and with best practices in regards to policy governance. And to effectively accomplish this activity, it requires that superintendent and staff and the board develop a reasonable interpretation that would include objective measures for each of these policy criteria as listed in the executive limitation. Then the board will need to approve that and interpretation prior to monitoring the policy. And the board plans to complete this revision update process prior to the next monitoring cycle in 2018, or 2019, I should say, I apologize. But with that said, as we look at monitoring this cycle, this means we're in the transition point. So we are still utilizing the old form and the old format. And they are sent early in order for us to review them prior to the board meeting. And any questions in regards to the report can always be emailed to the superintendent ahead of time. Please do so, so that they can be answered in a timely fashion. If you do have them, they can be answered at the meeting. And as you've seen, the EL will be placed on the non-consent agenda to provide opportunity for discussion. During this discussion, possible changes to the actual policy or additional requested evidence will be documented to address during the revision update process. Deciding it right here will be difficult, but that'll be an opportunity that we can document all of this and be able to do that through a study session or work session at that time. Action will be taken to approve the EL report at the end of our discussion as long as it's in agreement. So possible motions were provided to extend the work session of how we can go forward. Any questions on that? And I'm going to open it to discussion. Okay, so moving to discussion of EL7. Mark.
I have a number of points to ask, and I'm not sure, John, if you want to have yourself or if you want to have the folks in charge of SPED perhaps answering this. Take your choice. Page 18, caseload management. What about weighting the caseloads? My point is that you've got resource kids. 10 resource kids do not equal 10 transition kids. And it might be a consideration to weigh the necessity of, some may require more time, therefore that 10 in one area may actually equal 3 to another. I think it's something we need to really consider. Also, on the assistive technology, we talked about staff training, and one of the things that's really lacking is an ability for the parents to be able to use and utilize and reinforce the educators' lessons at home, just as it is with any other course studies. And it might be, I would like to suggest that we start looking into parent training, so as kids are given AT assistance or the AAC devices, that some parent training go along with it. After all, if you're having a sit down of 10 pairs or 12 pairs and the parents are available, then it would make sense to have those parents trained on those devices. I think it would make it better in school as well as at home. And I think you'd have a more successful student. And as we all know, once you take care of communications problems, you address and nip in the bud what would be behavioral problems down the road. On to dyslexia.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
So on the assistive technology, consultation services lists out 162. Not for this one, but downstream when you're reporting out, I'd like to know how many devices are in use, and just as assuming there's one device per kid. So consultation might not result in a device.
Well, the other thing is too, on the consultation as well as the use of the device, it is very easy to determine how well or not well the device is used in school. And when the device comes home as 0-0, somebody isn't doing their work. And some student is suffering as a result.
So this might be something when we're looking at the reasonable interpretation, that's a discussion point of what objective measures might be incorporated. So we'll just make sure to document that as we go through and work through that interpretation.
Okay. Go ahead. All right. I'm still concerned in the area of dyslexia that I'm afraid that Lake Washington is woefully behind. I mean, the Orton-Gillingham program has effectively addressed the needs for dyslexic students for 75 years, maybe 80, I'm not sure, on identifying and addressing the needs of the students with dyslexia. What about using these currently, what about using programs to remediate dyslexia when teaching all students instead of pull-out sessions for the kids with a quote-unquote problem? The studies have shown that non-dyslexic students benefit almost as much as the dyslexic students from the introduction of Orton-Gillingham. And if there's anything to assist a student in learning how to read or read better, good Lord, let's do it. It doesn't take a brain surgeon to think of that.
Could
God
I
knows
add
if I can think
something?
of it, you can think of it.
I'm sorry, Mark, could I add something to that?
Ma'am.
I'm just looking up above when it discusses co-teaching, and that seems like the training for co-teaching might be a great opportunity.
Yes.
Just thinking out loud.
I agree. By the way, as we look at we had a dyslexia advisory committee and with a members report. The members that I've talked to on that committee, the parents, felt like they were not listened to. They felt like they were brought in to rubber stamp what the staff had already come up with, and were extremely angry about it. They were, instead of being asked what they thought, they were showed, here's what we're going to do, which one do you like? Well, that's kind of like going into a restaurant and telling them that you can't order what you want. Or going into school and just, saying you can't take those electives. If we're wanting parent input and we're wanting parent involvement, by God, ask them the questions. Don't tell them what the answers are going to be and which answer do you like the worst or the least, because that's basically what you're doing. And when it comes to trying to pass bonds, those sort of things stick in the parent's craw as much as taxes do. Also,
So Mark,
Yeah.
on that one, I certainly have not heard the same degree of feedback from members of that panel as to being upset with how it proceeded. But they're definitely still interested in more involvement in the ongoing implementation. It's always hard to listen to see the various voices in the district. And in this case, the right questions have started to be asked, but the Orton-Gillingham question is Wonders, how does Wonders fit into Orton-Gillingham's framework? And certainly the question of simply how are we going to screen remains a high priority for us. Because I don't know that we've got universal screening built in. That wasn't part of the report yet. So anyway.
yeah, one of the problems.
One second. Remember, this is about the academic program, so it's great to have those, and we can build those in. The community engagement piece actually falls into another place, so we can document that and bring that over.
Okay, well, to just answer Chris's question, a lot of the comments were aired and voiced rather vehemently at the OSPI discussion we had. The one-on-one, or the discussion we had with the OSPI and the special needs parents, recall that?
That was the study session, if I remember correctly, that you're speaking to, when we did just a presentation on.
No, this was the OSPI coming and having 3 employees of the OSPI come and speak to the special needs parents.
It was for the WISM
Yes,
review.
yes, sir, thank you. Couldn't remember the acronym. I think as to the point about assessment, I think we need to really look at that too. If we're talking about equity in our district, assessment by those who can only afford it is not equity to those who can't.
Yeah, just on that piece, there was legislation just passed that we're analyzing right now, but it's requiring some level of screening, and I believe it's kindergarten through 3rd grade students to identify students that have indicators
Right.
of dyslexia.
But again, if we're studying it, let's not study it until, as long as we've been studying
Yeah,
Orton Gillingham.
If you could do a favor, I know we've had an update recently in a board brief in regards to the dyslexia legislation specifically and the programs that were being implemented. It might be beneficial to sort of build that, maybe another update.
Absolutely.
Once you know a little bit more.
We'll do a report back on both the legislation and work to date, and provide some additional information around some of these concerns, but
And work to date also, I'd like to have included in that your estimated completion date, because you can work on it forever.
Any other questions, comments on EL7? concerns?
I have a quick question on the English language learners.
Okay.
It says, what page am I on here? 20? Newly identified EL students are provided academic support through a summer program. I'm wondering how many students don't or aren't taking advantage of the program? Just out of curiosity. No rush.
Was your question how many are or how many aren't?
Both.
Okay, I just,
Sure. No, just curious.
Any other discussion on EL7? Chris?
Yeah, so I actually wanted to call out the success in the ELL programs, which we've been seeing in the reports, but here again, a 3-year ELL transition definitely is serving our elementary level kids, elementary and primary for sure, and probably to a large extent our middle and high school students. The piece that I was interested in, just not digging into this evening, but rather the expansion of our Quest enrollment at the K-5 level. In the last 4 years, we've, doubled it since, the last 5 years, since 2013, the number of kids in the K-5 program. It would be interesting to know more about how that is playing out for the children in the program. The advanced placement trends are actually surprising. I mean, maintaining the pass rate at 80% while expanding the number of tests taken is very good. So there are definitely arenas of success. The carry through on the WISM review and some of those other pieces is something where it's a work in progress. And it's definitely a desire to be kept, to maintain forward momentum. I guess that's all I've got.
you asked for information about K-5 ELL.
Not ELL. I meant the K-5 Quest program. It's really just, we've gone from page 23, or is it 23 or 24? No, 22. In 2013, we had 600 kids in the elementary Quest programs. This year, we've got 1,274. That's largely because we've expanded it down to the K1, 2 zone. But it's a question of how is that working? I mean, are we seeing expanded numbers being pulled up, or is it now that kids are just entering it earlier? Is there a bubble coming through at the 3 through 5 level? And also sort of breaking out at the elementary level, the split from full-time versus pull-out would be helpful.
So tonight, one of our program presentations is
I
on
know.
accelerated programs,
Yeah.
and so Matt will share some of that data. If it doesn't fully answer those questions, make sure to identify kind of what data you're seeking, because I definitely know what you're seeing there, and the increase has been because of our implementation of the K2, K3 highly qualified services.
Right. And really, when I mentioned full-time versus part-time, that's about breaking out the table and giving us the sub-numbers next year. And again, the K2 is something where it's going to be interesting to see how that works. I mean, our 3 through 5 numbers, are those steady at 593, or is it also growing? Anyway. And yes, I'm looking forward to the presentation this evening, so I'm done.
One of the EL, or EL 7.3, which is in partial compliance, it's if you at page 31 of 34. The reason it says that we say it's in partial compliance is because we have not yet fully developed and implemented parent and student data views as part of the overall CIP efforts. What would full implementation look like? And what is missing? It's not clear for me from reading the report.
Right. So we've, over the last couple of years, have implemented some additional levels of parent and data views. We think there's, and we can provide report back about that, but there's some additional data views that we just asked our parent community to kind of rank order for us. What are their priorities? What are they seeking as well? So we think that there's some additional work ahead based on the feedback we get from our parent communities, but we can share that with you.
Okay, the reason I ask is honestly, looking at this, it struck me as we are in compliance. And that's why I was confused as to what was missing.
So I'd say for us, the work project isn't complete yet.
Okay.
And so for us, it's in partial compliance.
Fair enough.
Oops, sorry. I know how loud I can be, so, but God knows the video people can't hear me. Special Services Program Review. Now, I had problems when we originally had the review with the Urban Collaborative, that how we kind of cherry-picked the recommendations. But that said, what about the recommendations to implement the every staffer responsible for every kid, because it ain't happening? Nowhere near it, not even in the same ballpark. From my observations, and I observe rather frequently. And if my eyes don't, another pair of eyes do.
Is this in response to one of the policy criteria or into some of the evidence that's there? Sorry, I don't have it right in front of me.
It's the idea of the program, the implementation of this 5-year action plan. I'm not seeing the every staffer responsible for every kid even close to being off the ground. I'm not sure what the plans are, how they're going to implement it. I just think that to be quite frank, we paid a lot of money to the Urban Collaborative, and we ignored a hell of a lot of its information, in my mind, and a lot of others.
So are you asking for greater breakout on the professional development piece? I mean, is that where you think it might have been included?
I think it's in the policy implement.
Yeah.
It's in the policy implementation, to be quite frank. I think that's where it really resides. And yes, it does belong in professional development as well, because basically, as far as I'm seeing, most of professional development revolves around how to deal with a child that is having an emotional problem at the time or a physical problem at the time, and be behavioral. That takes place on a very regular basis, but I'm not seeing a whole lot of professional development that takes place that deals with the other issues.
Dr. Sage?
Yeah, a quick question on page 33, the EL 7.5, in partial compliance with the PE that you mentioned earlier. Are other districts having this same issue? I assume if it's a lack of funding from the state, then other districts are probably experiencing this. And if so, are they finding any creative way to implement more?
It's my understanding that we're in a similar place as the majority of districts.
It'd be nice to be a leader. If we're the third largest, we ought to be leading the pack, not trying to see how well we're keeping up with the pack.
Okay, I just have one sort of big overarching piece as I read through the executive limitation in the policy, and that was dealing with equity. And looking through, because the academic program was a big piece, we speak about the opportunity gap and access our students have. There was only, I believe, in the highly capable, it showed a breakout based on the different subgroups. I would be interested to see how we better incorporate that type of breakout to ensure that our policy states all students. And so my question from there is, how effectively are all our accelerated programs accessible to all our students? How effective are we at making sure that opportunities of the arts or any of those are accessible to our students, that our choice schools are accessible to all our students? So being able to break that out by subgroups in some way would be helpful to look at. And I'm not sure it will be a possibility of having to build that through when we speak about and that's the piece I see as the reasonable interpretation piece that we work with, to be able to talk to it. So I'm not surprised it's not here now, so I'm not complaining in any way in that regards. It's more, I'm recognizing that's a gap in our policy, and so we need to be able to address that more effectively for the next year, so we ensure our opportunity, not just our achievement, is being addressed more holistically. So that's sort of my one big piece.
To tag on to your point on equity, I think that also staff needs to start thinking more broadly on equity, to be quite frank. We are ignoring, or I feel we're ignoring, by and large, the special needs students in that equity component. They are a segment of our population, and for us to ignore their potential and limit their options is criminal.
All students does mean all, so I would support that, but I do encourage that we continue to look across the board and be very proactive in really thinking about all those groups and ensuring that they have the capacity. So they'll just be looking at how we do that more effectively in that process. Any other questions on EL7s? Any concerns with approving it this evening? If not, I will entertain a motion.
Is this one where we have to say it right? No, then I move approval.
I won't force you to say it right.
Okay.
There were a lot of questions brought up, though. A lot of assertions made. Maybe we need to have answered before we can approve this.
I second Chris's motion to approve.
Okay, so it has been motioned by Director Carlson and seconded by Director O'Leary to approve the executive limitation EL7 for the academic program. So I will now open that up to discussion. So Director Stewart, it sounded like you had some discussion.
Sorry, I jumped in too fast.
Nope, that's fine.
I think given the points that were made by a number of us on the board, I think this is too early to be voted upon. I think these points need to be addressed. They need to be reconciled with reality. And I would move that, or I would suggest that we not vote to adopt it at this point.
Other discussion?
So I agree that all of the items that all of us brought up need to be addressed, but when I look at what did the executive limitation ask and what was provided to us, they stated whether they were in compliance or in partial compliance, and I don't know if that changes if we get more information about what we're hoping to do going forward.
I think it does.
Echoing, I appreciate some of the things that Mark and Chris and, well, even I brought up tonight. But we can't move the goalposts I might be mixing metaphors here.
A lot.
Anyway, I am hesitant. I mean, as presented, as the policy is laid out right now, we are in compliance or in partial compliance with everything. So I would support approving the EL7 report.
Director Carlson, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Sorry, one last thing.
Yep.
Apologies. And I know this, re-looking at these ELs is on our work plan. It's on our work plan for this current academic year to go into effect next academic year, and I look forward to the board working hard on going through all of these ELs and, if needed, revising them to reflect where we want to be.
So my thoughts on the EL stuff that's on the table. There is I mean, if you listen to us, you'd think that we were sinking or something. We're diving into the stuff where we have existing concerns. There are a tremendous number of arenas where we haven't mentioned them. I mean, out of 34 pages, I think we've talked about 8 of them. So there are a large number of arenas in which we are making very acceptable progress. The one that remains a concern is the SPED program review implementation. That's one where there is virtually nothing that's going to happen before summer breaks that's going to change where we are on that. So in the interest of accepting the ELs in the year that we're discussing them, my suggestion is that we accept them with the caveats that these are the areas of concern that we've expressed and continue to be things that as we go forward, we want to see more than just carrying momentum, but actually building momentum into them. So that is my thought.
So would you propose what specific actions are you speaking to?
Well, and that's where it comes to that the as we have our conversation around what end results, what's our monitoring going to be next year? What are the agreed upon goals and all of those pieces? That's the piece where I think this comes in. It's about this time next year, when we are talking about EL7 again, what are the really critical things? I mean, I can tell you, like I said, there's about 25 pages where the answer is keep doing it. But then there are a few pages where we'd like to see more than just what has been done. We'd like to see more details on it and perhaps more regular updates on that. I mean, unfortunately, things like the challenge of breeding a culture where SPED students are everybody's student. That is not something that gets solved in a week, a month, or even a year. But with continued focus, continued leadership, it's something that happens. So this is something where what I think we're expressing is interest in continuing the focus on those in the implementation and into the beginning of the evaluation phase. Carrying that through so that we really are continuing to, I mean, the engagement of the community was great. It's just the community is kind of like, now what? And the truth is, now what? It's hard to move fast, but we want to move as fast as we can. That's moving fast while being responsible. So anyway, that my take on it is that we accept the report as written simply because nothing here is going to change before June 4th. But we've had our statements around what do we want to see, and that gets incorporated into the work of the board for next year. Well, actually, if we didn't have this darn superintendent thing eating all of our hours, it would be being done now. But I think we had to punt some of the EL discussion to the next work session. Yeah.
With facilities.
Facilities, yes. Anyway, I think I may have said enough. Does that, okay.
Director Stewart?
It's been about a year, I believe, since we, 6 months at least, since we adopted the SPED changes, if I recall correctly. After the Urban Collaborative did their massive lift. I don't know how much longer we want to continue to wait until we can figure out how we're supposed to be measuring things. I think you've got a lot of parents, as we heard earlier, taking their kids out of our district. We're starting to get, our reputation had been very good for a long time about how we treat our special needs students, but it's starting to slip. And it's slipping with our own parents because they see inaction. And if we don't start addressing these things now, before we put in a new superintendent, what in the world is that new superintendent wonder what is his or her expectations? What is expected of them if we don't act now?
So I'm sensing what we need is a revision to the policy in order to attain the information the way that we want it and to have the meeting, such as the WISM group with the parents, to bring about the type of involved interaction that we want. I don't know how we take the policy as it's currently written and change something that has already happened. I feel like we need to revise that policy to add something.
So the question is, you remember, when we do the executive invitations, looking at compliance, was how that could be interpreted in any way reasonably, any reasonable person would interpret it, have they met that compliance? And I'm hearing that yes, for the most part, that compliance is there, in agreement with the partial compliance. There are areas for action that are being spoken to One is the concern in special education and in that program. How that fits into the actual criteria is the piece I think you're mentioning. So that's one piece to think of an action area, and I don't quite have a direct answer, but that's the piece. The other piece was equity, and how do we build that through more effectively through that whole process? Is there another big ticket action piece that I missed with that? I know there were a lot of smaller questions that came through that I think are going to be addressed in different ways, but from a bigger picture, I think those were the two big ones. Is that fair?
So looking at the structure of the report, the only piece where perhaps the actual, what has been stated in the report, 7.4, ensure that all instructional programs are regularly evaluated and modified as necessary to assure their continuing effectiveness. The Special Services Program Review concluded in 2016, the spring of 2015-2016 school year. We're in the spring of 2018, 2 years later, and the concern that's being expressed is that we're not seeing as much progress as we would have hoped to see 2 years later in some of these arenas. I mean, there are components like resources where resources are not going to change. Resources are what they are. They're finite and they're frustrating. But the pieces around the delivery models, where the rubber meets the road, it's a question of is there a consensus around this being partial compliance for 7.4 or reasonable progress? Therefore, full compliance on the reasonable progress front, even if we haven't arrived at the end point that we would like to be at. Does that make sense?
And this is where I'd say it's actually reasonable interpretation. So
Yes.
it's different.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge, that we're missing that piece
Yep.
in doing so. But I think you could easily have an action piece attached to it that says, would like to see more progress in 7.4, specifically under those evaluation piece and the special education and the special review services. Going forward, then we keep that in mind and how we go in writing the rest of that when we do the reasonable interpretation for next year's setup. Does that make sense? Then we don't move the bar.
And
At this time, we set it for the next.
that's exactly what I was hoping. That's where my interpretation was going, is that we aren't necessarily moving the bar, but that the bar next year is going to be very clear on where we want to be in achieving the goals of that program review. So
2 years ago, we had the SPED review, and we didn't move the bar. And now we're just kicking it down the road.
So I think one thing that we could offer as part of this is to provide an update on the efforts of staff to implement the recommendations of the program review. I know there's significant efforts that have been going on in a multitude of areas that we could provide update on. And so I wonder if that would help provide information to the board. So as we think about moving into next year, as we're rewriting policy, that it could help frame, there might be areas that the board needs information on that would alleviate concerns or would provide information to help understand the scope of the work that's going on, and then provide better information to identify data sources that would help the board be able to evaluate EL7, particularly 7.4.
Okay, we do still have a motion on the table to approve EL7. Go ahead.
Can we vote on that motion?
We could vote on that motion. Is there any request to make an amendment or an action item with that? That we do that with action of being able to incorporate equity and addressing 7.4 and evaluating progress in regards to the evaluation or those pieces. Does that make sense as to how I would recommend an action piece attached to that motion? Sorry.
Could we remove those two sections and vote on one separately?
No. So basically, the
Repeat what you-
motion is to approve EL7 as is, that it is in compliance, that we have monitored it for what it is, and future action going forward is to build equity into how we look at those academic programs and to address the 7.4, as Chris had mentioned, in regards to the evaluation of the special education, that's going to be a focus area going forward to provide update and setting timeline. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So then, I suppose I move to amend the motion that's currently in front of the board to reflect that while the board believes that we're moved to approve the current report, but seek to, and I'm going to forget all the words that you just said that I agreed with. Help me out here, Sari.
That we request two things.
Yeah.
We would request Superintendent Actions to provide us an update in regards to where the special services review is.
Right.
And then we have board action that we would like in which to be able to revise policy or be able to look at incorporating equity more effectively and in the reasonable interpretations going forward.
And I appreciate that as president, you can't make a motion, but can I just co-opt the words that you just said so I don't have to repeat them? Is that fair? Okay, then that's what I'm going to do.
Okay, there's now a motion on the table. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion as amended?
I seconded it.
Director Carlson did, sorry. No further discussion. With that, we will take a vote. All those in favor?
This is to amend, this is the motion.
This is the amended one, yes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes with 4 ayes, 1 nay. So thank you so much. And now we will move on to executive limitation 3. I'm sorry, 13, I believe. 12, maybe. 12, thank you.
So EL 12 looks at asset protection. This executive limitation requires the district to make sure that the systems, processes, procedures, relationships with insurance providers, legal entities are in place to make sure that our physical property, our intellectual property, and all of the district's assets are protected. You can see that, again, this year, we are reporting that all of EL 12 is in compliance.
Thank you. Okay, I will open that up to discussion on the asset protection executive limitation. You need to go, Director Stewart?
And looking at page 1, I understand that this is really looking at insurance coverage against casualty losses and injury to personnel and so forth, and property losses. But we're talking in here about training of SPED staff and other staff. And again, they are well-trained, or I shouldn't say well-trained, they are often trained on the how to deal with a person with a behavioral problem. I think that we need to have a broader look at that, especially in light of the OSPI mandated training on least restrictive environments, because that plays into the behaviors, that plays into our liability. And I believe the OSPI mandated us to do so back in August of 17.
If I could just clarify, was that for
Page 1.
page 1?
My understanding, as I recall, unless I'm,
Is that, so 12.1?
I believe it is, yes. Because it deals with staff training.
I think we're looking at 4 then on page 2, protect against negligent exposure of the district, the board, or staff to legal liability.
Thank you, I
Okay.
apologize.
So under the training component of that is what you're speaking to?
Yep.
And I'm not sure I'm clear on what you were asking, and I apologize. It might have been because I was trying to figure out where I was.
I think we're too narrowly defining training when it comes to the, because there's many things beyond just how to reasonable restraint, I think it plays into the issue of understanding least restrictive environments and being able to correctly tell parents what it is, as opposed to thinking they know what it is, because that all plays into the behavior model.
So if I'm following, you're saying that there is possible exposure in regards to that training is not being,
Yep.
okay, so then that's something to be looking at. Thank you. Okay.
It would be worthwhile to call the paraeducator liability component of training in that table on page 2 of 5. It's not really fleshed out at the level that would be helpful to understand the components of that training that are about liability. Mark's right that in terms of restraint, that is it's a very real liability exposure, and understanding what the training is around that, or just being more explicit about that piece. And IDEA is long-term something that it's not a liability in the sense of an acute suit, but it's definitely something that's a potential exposure to the district. LRE, abiding by LRE it should be called out explicitly somewhere in terms of training to avoid exposure to IDEA suits by making sure that things like this policy, or like I said, the culture of SPED students or everybody's student, that training is actually part of what we're talking explicitly about.
Yes, thank you, Chris, for clarifying that for me. And I think that that really goes not only to the parents, but also to the teachers, the assistant principals, the principals, and on up.
Yeah.
Can I add substitutes to that? Because it's often very difficult to
Yes.
walk into a room and,
Subs, volunteers, whoever.
And again, these are a lot of the details that might be fleshed out during the process with reasonable interpretation as to where those priorities would lie at different times.
Yeah, I'm not saying that they need to be solved tonight or even next week, but rather that next year I'd certainly like to see them called out explicitly.
Okay, two items. First of all, I just want to say that I'm happy with the report. I believe everything is in compliance, and I will, when we're done, move to approve it. 2 items to parking lot for future board discussion. I'm not sure if it's a good idea, but I'm going to just throw it out there anyway so we can discuss it later. And that is, I will start by saying I don't want to be intimately involved in all of the district's legal affairs as a board member, but it may be beneficial for the board to have more of a formal update from staff as to current pending legal issues rather than on the sort of ad hoc basis.
I agree.
I don't know. I don't actually know if I'm just throwing that out there. I don't actually know that I agree with that, but it's an idea I had as I was thinking through this. So it's something I think we need to discuss as a board and flesh out. The second item to parking lot. And on 7.5, we talked about protecting intellectual property. We may want to think about the board strengthening that policy, changing it. I mean, data security is going to be a huge, already is an ongoing issue. I don't know, I'm sure there are every day multiple attempts to hack our district system, and we're talking about potential liability for the district, and corporations get sued for this, for losing data information. It's something we need to be cognizant of monitoring as a board. I don't know what that looks like from a policy standpoint for the board, but I see that as a future issue and one that we should think about very hard.
To Eric's
Thank
point, the amendments that were offered to EL3, I think, address a lot of the problems that he's talking about, of being able to keep up with the litigation situation, knowing about major decisions by regulatory or judicial fiats. And I have a question about page 4 then. That then brings up the question about page 4. Let's see, under bullet 4, section 5, whatever the hell that, regular consultation with district legal counsel. Now, is that for staff consultation, or is that for board consultation? Because I think the board needs consultation as well.
Refers to staff counsel. The board does receive counsel from legal as needed.
Well, it's coming as needed, as dictated by staff, but not by board.
Actually, the board president has the right to request that legal option. So the board does have that capacity to do so and being able to ask if we do need legal counsel. Luckily, staff often proactively consider it and therefore have legal counsel here when they think it might be of necessary, especially bond sales. They tend to have it here, or any other issues. So that is a possibility that we do have.
Bond sales, anytime there's student discipline issues, things like that. So.
Any other discussion? If not, I will entertain a motion.
You
You have a question?
No, well, I was going to move approval, but I wanted to say it correctly.
Move acceptance
Yeah, I
of
just
the
move it. I
assertion
just
of progress.
move. Sorry, I don't
Yeah.
have it in front of me, but I move acceptance of this and executive limitation report as presented today. Recognizing that we are in the district has demonstrated it's in compliance with the ends limitations.
Do I have a second? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
It has been moved by Director LaLiberty and seconded by Director Carlson to approve the Executive Limitation 12, Asset Protection, as presented. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. All right, thank you. Solid discussion. We have more work cut out going forward and putting that together. So we'll also add the revision of looking at strengthening data security as to the piece we look at with EL 12, and then a discussion around legal affairs, which also incorporates an EL 3. Yes.
A quick point to Eric's discussion about data security. I think that also the other issue we need to be very aware of is the bullying online, and to make sure that, because if it's not taken care of, there have been suits back east, I know, that have come against the school districts because the students weren't adequately protected. So just want to throw that in the same category.
All right. So noted, right, Diane? Okay, so we have one more item on our non-consent agenda, and that will be approval of the assertion report for ER1, the ends results run on mission and vision. That report, I sent that to you last week. Basically, this is just the summary document of our discussion, and I have simplified it from where it was. So the assertion was, and it was actually moved last meeting as well, that reasonable progress has been made for the all student groups and some student groups, and I went on to specifically say, especially the on-time four-year graduation rate, that it has increased to 93.3, as well as we see a positive 5-year trend across all our subgroups, which is really to be commended for that type of work. It shows a lot of really good, solid work by our district. And there were some exceptions to the reasonable progress, which were in some student groups, the achievement gap continued to exist, as we saw, and the overall achievement has opportunity for improvements into relation to ranking, and specifically in certain subgroups. There were 4 focus priority areas that I sort of pulled out from that discussion. One of them was to continue the work that is already occurring with addressing the disparities between all the subgroups, while increasing the overall percentage achieved. Highlighting the programs such as College Bound, the 1821 Transition Program, the District Equity Team that really supports that type of work holistically. Also, staff to continue to work to support data analytical abilities at all levels of the organization. Understanding how to use data to inform actions is vital to address these more complex challenges that we're working with, so I want to encourage that. The third one was the 5-year graduation rate has not increased consistently, and there appears to be some opportunity to strengthen that piece. Knowing that graduating from high school is an important step for success, it'd be good to evaluate ways in which to serve students better to achieve that goal. And the fourth one were specific interventions that strengthen students' access to dual credit courses, evaluate and mitigate barriers that might be limiting participation, i.e. cost, prerequisites, not being asked, needing additional supports. As more students take those dual credit courses, we need to consider those additional supports required for students taking college credit-bearing courses in high school in order to have a higher success in earning a B. So those were the 4 priority areas. Was there any comments or discussion on those pieces? Something missing? Anything you'd want to add? Amend, revise? Nope? Okay.
Do we need to move to approve this before we, is that what we're doing tonight? Before-
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And the report presentation overall, basically saying it was an excellent shift in how the report was presented, that reasonable interpretation in that piece was really helpful, and to continue to do that for ER2 that we haven't done for literacy, math, and science. That really helped to break that out. And then there was just some simple feedback on the indicators of considering for the future. One of those being that this ends result defines future ready as ready for college, ready for global workplace, and ready for personal success. Much of our data really addresses the ready for college, somewhat for the ready for the global workplace. It'd be interesting to pursue some possible measures that really look at some of those soft skills, exposures or experiences that might help to do a preparation for personal success in global workforce from another angle. So that's just something to think about for the future as we look through those things. So any questions or any feedback on that summary report as that will go forward?
No, thank you, excellent.
If so, then I will
I move.
entertain a motion.
I move approval of the ER1 report.
Second.
Any discussion on ER1, assertion of progress? If not, then we will go ahead and vote. Oh,
Rumor has it this is where the motion's supposed to be the long one with the right words, and I've been delivered the right words, so.
No, I don't,
this
You got
was
it right.
already an approved
Okay,
motion.
there we go.
we've
This-
approved the
Yeah,
ER1
okay.
report.
And so
we did.
now it's just the assertion of progress that's
Right.
being moved and
Okay.
approved. So we have a motion on the table to move and approve the assertion of progress as written.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. We now have an assertion of progress. Thank you. So now, thank you for all that. And I've just lost my agenda. I apologize. Oh, excellent. The superintendent search update. As you know, we are in the process that Dr. Pierce will be stepping into a new role as Director of College and Career Readiness. And so we are now in the process of conducting a superintendent search. We have hired Ray & Associates to help facilitate that process. And this process will incorporate 3 phases. So we'll have phase 1, which is really developing the candidate profile. Phase 2 will be recruiting candidates and interviewing semifinalist candidates. And phase 3 will be conducting the finalist interviews. And so we are currently in phase 1. The survey was put out for the last week and a half. It actually closed this morning, which is addressing 30 qualities of a superintendent, as well as just an overview of the district and where it's at. We'll be getting those results and discussing those on Thursday, along with there have been 23 focus groups held and community meetings with a total of over 140 people, and there are actually 7 more planned for this week as well to be completed by Wednesday, with 1 extra on the 15th. So that will do that component for informing. Our goal is to have, the plan is to have a superintendent named by June 30th is where the timeline is. So we will have application and recruiting will be through the month of May, first week of June. And then we will continue into the interviewing screening process for about 3 weeks in June to be able to name a finalist in the last part of June. So there is much more information available on the website under a tab named Superintendent Search. And on there will be a timeline. We have established several special board meetings. There'll be a board meeting this Thursday, actually, a special board meeting in which we'll be discussing the results from the survey as well as the candidate profile and moving to approve that. Then there are a variety. May 14th, there will be another special board meeting. We'll be talking about the interview process and what that will look like and what components of that will be through those stages. And then we will be having special ones in June as well, and that whole schedule is online. Any questions?
Actually, I just wanted to point out, since tomorrow's meeting, community meeting, was an add-on, there's a community meeting tomorrow at Kamiakin Middle School at 6 o'clock for anybody to come out that wants to hear more about the superintendent search and give their thoughts.
Any questions from the board? So it is a busy time, and we are very thankful for our community in coming forward and providing a lot of input at this point in time. It's been really beneficial, and it will be very informative as we go forward in this search process. It's very exciting, and we appreciate all the support staff has also given in being able to pull this off. Anything else? Okay, then I think we will move on from the superintendent search, and we will go to program reports. So our next item is the program reports. We'll be starting with world language. Dr. Holman.
Great. So tonight we have a series of program reports. Some of these pulled forward from our last board meeting when we went a little bit long, and so we pushed those to this meeting. We will start this. The first program report will be on world language, and Mike is here to share that with us. And okay.
And do you have it on your screens?
We have it on
Okay.
our
Well,
screens.
at least that
It's
we
all
have that.
yours.
Good. Well, thank you. So I want to present an overview of world languages tonight, similar to what was presented last year, but there is some new data and information that we'll point out as we're going through the report. As you recall, this is a brief overview of our world languages program K through 12. So as you recall, in our end results and means, we look for areas where there's connections, and we definitely see lots of connections, particularly in content knowledge, literacy, and language is one in particular that we look at, as well as culture when we're thinking about world languages. And then very specifically, also thinking about communication and collaboration skills, as well as local and global citizenship. And we know that there are multiple languages spoken around the world, and so this is an area of particular interest as we develop language skills in our students. So the world languages are currently, as a state, put into kind of a conceptual framework that are looking at some key areas that we want to develop as we teach students language. And so obviously one is communication, but we also think about language as a way of expressing and accessing culture, as well as making connections to people in the world, looking at how we can compare and forming communities. So the world language content and standards really are built around this conceptual framework. And so as you look at the standards themselves, you see that we're teaching students these 5 C's as they're referred to in the state standards. For example, in Spanish, where we're engaging students in conversation, that's a form of communication. If we're looking at having students acquiring information and recognizing viewpoints, that's looking at making connections. In Japanese, when students are looking at the nature of language by comparing two languages, that's an opportunity to compare and contrast. So lots of different ways for students to do all of those different things. It's more than speaking a language, it's really all of those connections. So as we think about our programs then, those language standards really are the foundation of our program. In elementary school, we start with language as a form of culture and thinking about culture, and then also see it in our content areas. So for example, in our music program, students have opportunities to sing and communicate in multiple languages. Our social studies emphasizes cultures of different parts of the world and talks about communication as a form of that, but also in the culture of the school. So seasonal events, assemblies, international nights, and PTSA programs all help to build that common understanding, that common culture. There also has been an interest for a number of years, and I'm pleased to announce tonight that we are planning on launching a dual language immersion program next year at Einstein Elementary. We've spent a year doing quite a bit of research and making sure we have all of the systems and structures in place to launch that program. The program is a combination where we have half of the day will be taught entirely in Spanish and half of the day will be taught in English, and the class composition will be 50% native Spanish speakers and 50% English speakers, so that kids are doing a number of things. They're learning to do all of those 5 C's, to speak and read and write in another language. But we also know in a dual language program, there's high academic achievement that follows and that cross-cultural competence. So as I mentioned, we're looking at having families who are Spanish speaking with incoming kindergarten students as well as first grade students participating in the program. Because it is at Einstein and like our choice programs when they're in a school, first preference goes to families in that school, but we also have been reaching out to families in our district with direct communication. That's phone calls in Spanish and English and family information nights to Spanish-speaking families, and we have another couple of parent information nights for the rest of the district coming up as well. And then we will be opening an application process on May 18th. We already have, as I mentioned, had a parent night with Spanish-speaking families, and they were very excited about the program and were telling us, get us that application, we're ready to sign up. So we know we have enough families to launch the program. We've also hired a bilingual teacher who has experience in a dual language program. We were able to steal her away from Seattle, so that was a big part of it. You want a teacher who actually speaks Spanish to teach the Spanish portion of the day, and speaking it well. And so she's from Venezuela and will be joining us for our next series of parent information nights to help promote the program. We also have a whole group of people who have been helping us, from the principal, Robin Amaya at Einstein, Sue Ann Sullivan, the director of school support, the EL teacher, Jen Roberts, as well as our program specialist, Nicole Rodriguez, have all been helping us develop and create this program. And it's been a long time coming, but we're very excited. And so we'll have more information in a brief later this week, and then as the program launches as well. In middle school, and again, this is the wonderful thing about developing languages in the elementary, and as students go into middle school, they get some wonderful opportunities to learn language. We offer programs in Spanish, French, Japanese, and Latin at Stella Scola. And then in our courses in middle school, students can earn high school credit. And French, Japanese, and Spanish all have second year. We ensure that all high schools have second year courses there. And then, as with all of our content areas, we want to make sure kids have quality instructional materials, so we have core materials for each of those, as well as standards that accompany them. And so, as I mentioned, we do have our middle schools then feed wonderfully into our high schools, where there's, again, a rich series of opportunities for kids to extend their world language experiences. So as we mentioned, Spanish, French, and Japanese, and American Sign Language. Mandarin Chinese was a program that was at Lake Washington High School that because of enrollment we are not offering anymore, but it has been a program that has been in our system. And again, core curriculum materials that follow with each of those, as well as opportunities for kids to practice their languages through World Language Clubs in most of our high schools. And so again, that's a wonderful thing too, when kids have opportunities to communicate and discuss and think in another language beyond the classroom. That allows them to extend their learning. We also want to remind the board about our language requirements. Many of our students take more than 2 years, but 2 years are required. And there are some options for kids, just knowing all of the things that are on their plates. They can choose to bypass the world language through a personalized pathway requirement or a world language competency credit. Those allow students some additional options. And just to review what those are, for the world language credit options, students can choose to say that based on their career pathway, college and career plan pathway, they can take another class. Now they have to acknowledge that many cases colleges require multiple years of a world language, but many of our students do have different pathway options that they choose to take. We also have a really wonderful opportunity for students to earn world language credit through competency or proficiency through a world language competency assessment that's delivered here in Lake Washington. We offer sessions in October, November, January, and March, and you remember a few years ago, Matt Monabianco really spearheaded expanding and making that program accessible to our students, and you'll see some data on that in a little bit. Many of our students earn credit that way now. So, as I mentioned, that has significantly changed over the past few years. Going back to 2013-14, where we weren't necessarily offering, students would go to other districts to get credit. Now we're offering here in Lake Washington, and you can see the number of credits that we're offering by year. 2017-18, the latest data is up there, and we still have more testing that's happening, so that could potentially increase. So Just as an interesting piece of data as well, you can see there's a variety of languages that students are receiving credit in. Spanish is our #1, but Russian is also a close second. And again, pretty consistent from year to year with those top languages being areas where our students are doing an assessment to earn credit that will carry with them. We also look at how our students do in advanced placement options, accelerated or advanced courses. And so we have AP courses in Chinese, French, Japanese, and Spanish. Again, as you know, Spanish is the course or the area where we have the most students taking AP exams, but also good representation in the other areas as well. And again, very high pass rates when you look at that, even compared to state or compared to prior years as well, pretty consistent pass rates. We also mentioned earlier, I think last year, and it's one of our indicators now, the seal of biliteracy on our diplomas. I believe we have 55 students that earned this last year. This is an opportunity for students to demonstrate competency or demonstrate world language proficiency through AP scores of 3 or higher, IB, which we don't have, or achieving 4 credits. So that first and third indicator are ways that students can earn the seal of biliteracy on their diploma, which is a recognition of their perseverance and their work in language in our schools. So again, that's a high-level overview of world language in our district. We do see it as an opportunity to build language competency and skills across a K-12 continuum, and we're excited some of the new things that are happening.
I just want to point out the big effort that Mike and the team has done to get the dual language immersion program up and running and prepared for next school year. It was significant study, effort, attending conferences, just the decision around what program, what style of program. Is it 50-50? Is it 90%, 10%? There's all sorts of decisions that have to be made. And then the actual outreach that's occurring, they are doing a large effort to make sure that everyone in the community knows about this program, that our Spanish-speaking families are aware of the program, the benefits of the program, and we're excited to see what this does for the students that participate. So, thank you.
Any other questions? Director Sage?
Is there a deadline for when students let you guys know that they're interested in that program?
Yes, we did an initial outreach to Spanish-speaking families in the Redmond learning community just to see if we had enough interest to run a program, because as we mentioned, you need 50% Spanish-speaking students to run the course. So we got enough interest there to say it's worth continuing. So we're putting a connections article out this week, and then we'll do direct email to both Spanish-speaking and English-speaking K-1 families. Then they will attend a family night, and then the online application opens on, I believe we said May 17th. And so that'll be as we start getting applications. Our goal to run the program in each grade level would be to have 20 students, 10 Spanish-speaking, 10 English-speaking in each grade level.
That's great. It's exciting that this is becoming a reality. Have we thought about calling them personally?
Yes, we did
Okay,
do that.
all right. Just want to make sure.
We have a Spanish-speaking person who's an interpreter in our district, but also a parent volunteer. So she and Robin and I actually called families directly. They did a first school messenger and then a follow-up reminder in person, and actually sold the program and made a personal
Great.
connection. And then at the family night, they were there as well, talking with families in Spanish. And so that,
Super.
we believe, really was one of the key factors in launching.
Yeah, and a little bit of a personal touch, too. And then one last question. On the Mandarin, how many students do you need to be able to run a
So it would be a
language class?
similar thing. The difference with Mandarin is a combination of two things. One is the teachers, the number of teachers. Even with Spanish dual language, finding teachers is a challenge because our teacher prep programs don't have dual language programs currently. Now, the University of Washington is looking at that, and the Southwest does have it, and there's even fewer in Mandarin. The second thing that's really interesting with Mandarin, and it's not to say it couldn't be something on the horizon, there is, I think it's the Foreign Language Institute, which gives training to State Department officials about language development. They classify languages by difficulty and the amount of time it takes to learn. Spanish is one of the shortest amounts of time. I think it's about 400 or 500 hours. Mandarin, on the other hand, is on the other end of the spectrum. It's I think, over 1,000 hours. And so it's a much different program. When we were working with Bellevue, their recommendation was is you get a program started, you get a dual language program started with Spanish, and then other languages would be kind of a second tier once you learn about the program.
Sure, I was just wondering about the Lake Washington High School and the Mandarin program, sorry.
I'm sorry.
No,
I didn't
sorry,
make that track.
I wasn't clear.
So it was simply, that was a combination of enrollment. There weren't enough students, kind of about that 15 to 16 ratio. And then same thing, teachers sometimes is a challenge to make sure we're staffing. Is that correct? I'm sorry, I didn't make that adjustment. I was so excited about elementary dual language.
Director Stewart?
Quick question. As I looked at the languages you all had, I understood that the American Sign Language would qualify for the requirement.
Yes.
But I didn't. Did I miss it on the charts, or is it something we'd look at separately?
You go back a slide.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It may have just been me. And I was curious if all the high schools have the ASL, or
Oh, yes.
where did I miss it?
You want the high school programs that are offered?
There.
Yeah. So
now I see it. I'm sorry.
Each of our high schools
Okay.
offers at least 1 through 3.
Are we considering offering SEE?
You know, it'd be something we can ask. You know, the 7-period day is creating some opportunity, so.
Because there have been situations, especially with needing of interpreters for the special needs program, in which the student spoke SEE, the aides spoke ASL, and ASL telling the person to hurry up was just the opposite in SEE, and caused a little bit of a stir in a fire drill. The child wasn't trying to be non-compliant, he just didn't understand.
It's
He
something
or
we
she.
can at least look into. I think it's a combination of
Resources.
Yeah, resources, curriculum, training, all of that.
So while we're on the topic, so all of these are offered at each of our comprehensives?
Yes, yes, except for Mandarin, as I mentioned.
Okay.
And then sometimes what will happen is, there'll be a few things that could happen. Some years they might have to put 2 classes together because of enrollment.
Right.
Some years there might not be as many kids in 4, but then the following year there's a 5.
Yeah, I was looking at the numbers of AP tests taken
Correct.
and thinking that
Yes.
that class is
Yes, so
petite.
oftentimes they're combined, so
Yeah,
2
okay.
groups will be together in a classroom.
Okay, thanks.
All right, I want to say thank you on getting the dual language program. When I came here in 2003, I was always saddened we didn't have it. So it's great that it's finally happening, and I think it's a great opportunity for our district. At the same time, the next question I would have is in looking at the world languages, are we looking at possibilities for in our elementary schools across the board of being, or because right now it's 8th grade where we
Yeah.
really start most world languages? How are we looking? I know our PTAs do quite a
Yeah,
bit
you know,
of it and a lot of work.
interestingly, that was part of our research as we were looking at dual language programs, and we were, as I mentioned, in the Southwest, talking with schools and districts around the country. What we found is if your goal is to do all of the things that we mentioned in a dual language program, biliteracy, bilingualism, learning any kind of fluency, that anything you would do in an elementary school, as I mentioned, that multiple hundreds of hours, really is best served through a dual language program. Now, we can get experiences built into the curriculum, but it doesn't get you quite to the same place. So if you think about, for example, music specialists that we have 2 days a week for 30 minutes a week, and you're thinking about over the course of the year, that might be, 50 hours or so, you're not going to get anywhere near that amount that a kid would need to be biliterate. So really it's about building an appreciation for the language and the culture. So I think it would be probably looking at more how do you build that into existing curriculum than as opposed to a goal of trying to get to biliteracy or bilingualism.
It'd be interesting, because I know Highline School District has been working at having all their schools be
Yes.
bilingual, dual language immersion across the board. I'm not sure what stage they're at yet, but
Right.
having had the opportunity to go and visit, it was pretty impressive to see the diversity of languages being spoken. Many of the kids actually were trilingual by then.
Yeah.
Well, many of our students already come speaking many languages,
Yeah.
so this
And
is
actually
just
we're
building in
sending,
the other opportunities.
We'll be sending some of our staff to a training there.
Oh,
In
wonderful.
July, they're teaching biliteracy for educators, and so
Oh,
that'll be
great.
part of the work we do to get our team prepared.
Thank you. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much. This is exciting. Good work.
Yeah, thanks.
So then our next step is for our next program report, Accelerated Programs.
So Matt actually has two program presentations, and I'll kind of do a prelude to both. The first is accelerated programs, looking at many of our programs within our system, elementary through high school. His second program presentation, last year you received the College and Career Readiness presentation and a subsequent CTE presentation. As we looked at it, we really saw the connections in both of those areas, and so Matt has combined those two program presentations, and so you'll see two presentations tonight. The first, accelerated programs. The second is College and Career Readiness and CTE.
Thanks, John. I like the word prelude. I don't hear that often enough. That's great. Thanks for your introduction. It's great to be in front of you, board. Thank you for having me. This is, again, a reminder. This is a very high-level 10-minute overview. So there may be areas you want to go deeper, and we certainly can. You know that we've done study sessions, hour-long, dedicated just on accelerated programs. But to get us right into it, I want to start with mentioning that the program you're going to see is going to span the entire K-12 range. So it is, as John pointed out, not just on Quest Elementary. In our program, or in our district rather, we have programs for students that span K-12. They meet the learning styles and needs of students who have been assessed to have exceptional intellectual, academic, and creative abilities. I was just doing the math and realized that our K-3 highly capable program started with just kindergarten 4 years ago. And it's now K-3 4 years later. Started with K and then built to K-1, K-1-2, K-1-2-3. I'm excited to say that next year we will have a full complement of K-5. So we're actually adding 3 additional teachers, and we will not only do 4th grade, but we're going to go ahead and since we assess students, we're going to have a complete K-5 highly capable. Back in 2015-16, that program was expanded because of a study we did through OSPI that we were required to and move into compliance, so that we're now serving students who are strong in math or strong in language, but not necessarily strong in both. And so we'd have students who were very skilled in one area, but weren't meeting the criteria in highly capable. And I'm wondering why I'm getting looks. Are you not seeing the program?
No, sorry. We've got a mic that's, it sounds like
Not
a mic
working?
is loose or something. Yeah. Not feedback, it's just clicking. Yeah. That one, I don't see the mic is on.
Not sure where it's
so.
coming from. I'm pretty sure I turned that one off. Okay, I'll move on. At any rate, I was saying, because of the consolidated program review we did several years ago, we began to serve students starting with 15-16's identification who were strong in math domain or in English domain, but not necessarily in both. The 2-5 pull-out quest, the 2-5 full-time quest continues, 6-8 middle school quests, and you're going to see our high school enrollment, which you were mentioning earlier, and seeing advanced placement growing, college and the high school honors, and Running Start. The K-3 program has students attending their neighborhood school. They aren't traveling. They aren't going somewhere for pull-out. The teachers come into their school and provide services in either math or English, language arts, based on the students' needs. Students in grades 2 through 5 pull out still continue to have that one day with common peers, typically multi-aged, starting with 2-3 and 4-5. They're focusing on some project-based learning with an emphasis on integrated social studies and science themes. Full-time Quest starts at grades 2 and continues through grade 5 at the elementary level, continues in the middle school, as you'll see coming up. Students are performing work that exceeds grade level standards by at least 1 grade. Our middle school Quest program, 6 through 8, students are attending, again, a self-contained core content area. In grade 6, they are together for language arts, social studies, science, and math. Grade 7, it expands to having math courses that are where they are best placed, so they may be in an algebra course or beyond. The emphasis, again, is on academic thinking skills and strategies. You know, a little anecdote, I don't think I told you this, that when we were studying the 7-period day, I was invited by Evergreen Middle School Quest class to come out and visit with them. They had read everything that was on our website, including summaries of minutes, and were interviewing me and wanted to know what my opinions were about the best way to go about adding to another period of the day, or whether we should break into a trimester or a different way of organizing the day. And they wanted to know, well, what's your opinion? And I kept trying to explain that it wasn't just my opinion, but we were working this committee process. And I'm not sure why I'm telling you that, other than that I was so impressed by how thorough they were in terms of the research they did, and that's why I'm telling you that. It's the lateness of the evening I can blame it on. K-8 Quest enrollment, as you pointed out, continues to grow. As you can see the numbers, I didn't break that out. We can. I know you'd probably want to see the breakout, especially with the K-3 numbers are embedded within that 1247 that you're seeing, and it's steadily risen, as you could see, from 842 back in 15-16 to where it is today. Middle school continues to also grow. The total program has grown by 31% actually over the last 3 years. When we look at our students and their performance in both literacy and math in meeting or exceeding standards and disaggregate on them, as we've done in EL7 and other reports, 100% of our students are at or exceeding standards. That's also true in math as well. We move now to high school. We've added a couple of things that weren't there last year. We've deliberately added some information on honors, college and the high school that we hadn't. We were highlighting a lot with AP, little with Running Start, but the big focus was AP. These courses, I can confidently say now, are offered at all of our high schools. They may vary depending on the number of students enrolled or the demand. For instance, Calculus A, B, BC wouldn't necessarily be offered in the same year, but it would be rotated over 2 years. But all of these courses now are common across all of our comprehensive high schools. You can see our continuing increase, and I want to remind you this is not individual head count. This is the number of students who have enrolled in a course. Thinking about other ways that we can display this data for future reports, it would be helpful to, for instance, identify or aggregate what percentage of the school is actually enrolled in AP, as opposed to just giving you numbers like 5,565. I think that kind of context, as I'm thinking about it, would be a useful way of seeing what's some common measurements or some way of benchmarking across the schools. We're pleased to have been named to the AP Honor Roll for the 4th year in a row. This is 4 years in a row that the College Board has acknowledged us as a district that is continuing to see an increase in AP access to typically underrepresented students, while we're also maintaining or increasing the percentage of students that earn a 3 or more at the AP level. Moving to college and the high school, this is where students are actually earning college credit while they're fulfilling a high school graduation requirement simultaneously. They're using college curriculum, so shown there is the University of Washington, and they're actually using that college curriculum and texts, and the grading scales are equivalent to the college. Our enrollment there, you could see, based on this year's October 1 count, is at 1,571, quite a jump from 988 students of just last year, but that was a dip as well. But we're still above where we were 2 years ago, back in 15-16. The Running Start program is a state program which encourages 11th and 12th graders to also enroll in college-level courses at community, technical, state colleges across the state. Running Start offers challenging options while they're also starting to earn college credit and meet not only their high school requirements, but college. It's a quick way to start knocking off some of those early entry-level first-year courses early on as a junior or as a senior. Here again, you see the enrollment increase over last year and where we were 2 years ago with 440 students in 15-16. New to the report, I think this is actually at a request last year where you were asking, where are we with honors? Honors courses are in all of our high schools as part of the options. The enrollment over the last 3 years has been fairly steady. I wouldn't say jumps in growth, but it's close to 5,000 students that are enrolled in courses that are designated honors. And that is our accelerated programs, very high level report, and certainly lends itself, I'm sure, to more questions and desire for more breakouts, and we can certainly provide those, as I see, judging by the reactions.
You know me too well. So I just wanted to let you know that I'm not becoming schizophrenic. The spit protector on his mic is gone, and we were hearing his air when he exploded peas and breathed on his
Is
mic.
that what it is?
Sure we were,
That's what's
Chris.
going on.
Sure we were.
Anyway,
Get back a little
I'm
bit.
not delusional. Anyway.
You think it is? Okay.
So, no, the more important question I've got is sort of around our pipeline. It's interesting to me looking at the numbers coming through our elementary programs and then middle school programs. And then get to high school, where we sort of transition from Quest to AP. And what's interesting to me is that the elementary and middle school levels, if you average it out, it's about 150 kids per class level who are in our gifted program, or our highly capable program. And then we have 4,500 AP tests are taken in our district annually, which means that the vast majority of our AP tests are being taken by kids who were not in Quest.
Who were
Not in Quest, ever. Which is an interesting detail for me. I'd very much like to know how many of our AP tests are being taken and passed by kids who were never given gifted challenges at the K-8 level. My suspicion is that the majority of our AP tests in the district are being passed by children who are not considered gifted at the K-8 level, which to me is a bit of a travesty. Anyway, that's my only observation from this evening.
Matt, I'd like to encourage you, especially since you're a Chicagoan by birth, to take a look at New Trier, their school district, their high school district, since they actually separate high school out from the elementaries, as I understand. Their honors program, I understand they have a double-level honors program, and it might be a way to increase the ability of students to take the classes. I don't know, but I'd be interested in hearing what you could find out, because I think it might be something to, I mean, their district, to be quite frank, is one of the top in the country.
Evanston?
No, New Trier.
New Trier.
I think that's either Wilmette or Winnetka, one of the two.
Got it. Thank you.
T-R-I-E-R.
And it's a double-level honors program.
Yeah, that's the way I understand, that's what it's been described to me.
Thank you.
Just a quick question for you. Are there any more wait lists anymore for the gifted or highly capable? We took care of all of those through the expansion
Several
of the
years,
program.
I'm pleased to report, and I mean several years. It's at least 5+ years that we've not had anything to do with anything on wait list at all.
And that's even with the addition that we went to in doing single
That's
domain and moving forward that way. So that's great that you continue to
correct.
expand the program to make sure that we didn't have wait lists
Mm-hmm.
going through. So thank you for making sure that occurred.
It's 'cause a related question to that. At the middle school level, how many of our middle schools have a gifted program?
We have
We've
programs
got
right
AP
now.
classes in all of our senior high schools, but at the middle schools, we've got how many gifted?
We
schools?
have, how many schools? We have Evergreen, we have Kamiakin, and we have Redmond Middle School. Those
Right.
three right now are, but now remembering that students are transported to those schools
Yeah.
from the
I'm-
various communities.
Just going to argue that if we have AP classes at all of our high schools, we should probably have a gifted program at all of our middle schools.
And you will remember in the Redmond Learning Community, we will, when the other middle school opens, there'll be a
And
highly
in the
capable
Lake Washington
then.
Learning
So-
Community, we still won't have any.
Absolutely. So we should be looking at how we expand that across, and that should definitely be a goal going forward. The other piece is in a variety of different information, college and the high school, when you had that broken out, I believe in EL7, actually, the academic program, it was clear that some high schools offered many more than others. And it wasn't clear to me why that would be true, because it seemed like a great opportunity. Again, this would be a place that I'd be looking for equity across the board, too. I do know when I break out If I look at the demographics in highly capable, if I look at the demographics in our AP, we definitely have unrepresented groups in those areas, which brings multiple questions. I know that's being addressed in many ways, but just want to make sure that's always on the table.
I'd actually like to comment on that if I could. College and the high school where it is today has an opportunity like AP was several years ago. AP several years ago was pretty school dependent until leadership at the central office working with high school principals and administrators decided that we really needed a system-wide approach. And so when I showed that slide and paused and said I can confidently say these are offered at all, I can't confidently say that at college and the high school. So it's at that evolutionary stage and an opportunity for us where we could begin, not just begin, but get going on how do we make sure that's not just school dependent.
That's great. And knowing that fees are attached to earning those credits and different things, be sure to incorporate that concept of how do we, if this is important that our students take a college level, that helps to set them up well for the future, then we should be willing to help fund that to ensure that they have that access.
And I want to pile onto this one. Just from personal experience, between the college and the high school and the AP credits, my son, who's finishing his freshman year, is currently a second semester junior. This is a huge advantage for families who are means limited. I mean, I can't pretend that we are in any way, shape, or form, but if it's a really cheap way to get through a whole bunch of college, and it's wonderful. So I am hugely in favor of this. And as Siri pointed out, from an equity perspective, I'm very interested in making sure that there's no barrier to our free and reduced kids to entering these and getting the credits. I think it's $300 per credit.
It can be expensive.
If I could build on that, actually, Chris, I believe as Siri was going through ER1 and mentioning focus areas, one of the places she mentioned was dual credit access. Our students being asked, are we seeking out, how are we making the opportunity of Running Start? Not just something you figure out on your own.
So anyway, you're going in the very right direction. I encourage it strongly, and I want to see it developed as fully as we can.
Two quick questions. One, I have heard from parents in the Juanita community that there are some honors classes that aren't offered at Juanita. Don't know if that's accurate or not. Specifically Algebra 2, that somebody, Eastlake maybe, offers an honors Algebra 2. Parents were curious. Does it come down to we need a teacher to teach it, or why the discrepancy? And not just Algebra 2, I'm curious what's the discrepancy of any honors courses between high schools. And then somewhere in today's board packet, I read that all first graders are screened. Is that for HiCap? Okay. Just how long have we been doing that?
Oh my gosh, longer than that. I want to say at least 5 years now that we've been universally screening, at least that long.
Yeah, it was your second.
I want to say we're at least, I want to say 5, but I may be wrong, and I will follow up on that.
Okay, and universal, every single student
Every single
is
first
screened
grader, unless
for
they
highly
opt out,
capable.
or and by that meaning that the parent wouldn't want them to, and I don't know if that's happening, so
Okay.
every single first grader, correct?
Thank
Let
you.
me find out the exact time period. The older I get, the more the years either seem longer or less.
Thank you.
I'll check on that. I also will check on the other question you raised about Juanita's honors Algebra 2. That would be a follow-up.
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you very much, Matt. I guess
Thank
we can
you.
move on to your next one.
All righty.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
I'm sorry to take your lead.
As Matt's pulling this up, a program report on college and career readiness and CTE really looks to address what are some of the systems that are in place to help our students meet our mission and vision, and what are some of the programs that allow us to be able to assure that students are leaving our system with some of those requirements in place. And so Matt has done a nice job of putting much of that together, so it's all yours, Matt.
Thank you. I'll try to stand back from the mic so I'm not spitting so much. Maybe this will help too. The area of our profile that we really want to hone in on for this aspect of college and career readiness is the career planning and life management cell. And so I wanted to just have you hone in on these, mostly the 4 areas that I'm going to be highlighting are the first 3 bullets and the last, which is the skills to locate and evaluate school and career information. Several of the slides title that way. You know, how are we helping students locate and evaluate school and career information, developing a future school and career plan, understanding and applying skills in personal finance literacy and consumerism. And then I'm not so much honing in on healthy habits, not because they're not important, but that we're not highlighting that in this particular presentation. And then lastly, entrepreneurial and management skills, which you're going to see through student opportunities across the system. A slide that I like to start with is just the picture of the pathway and the head and heart of students, and realizing that we're not dictating the pathway, we're helping kids discover, uncover their passion, and connect it to a pathway that is unique to every individual to help them go as far as they go, and where they go is really up to them. And that's what we start as early as kindergarten. People think I'm kidding when I say that actually there are lessons in kindergarten that have early starts, and this is an actual worksheet on the right, by having kids think about their interests and their strengths. What am I good at? That question is, what are 2 of your interests or strengths related to school and work? The second one is, how do your interests fit with your career choices? Worded differently, not as complex or dense at the kindergarten, but it begins with kindergarten and continues all the way through the 5th grade. Starting to get kids thinking about my career, my potential career. What are the things that interest me? What's my passion? In secondary, when we move from elementary to middle and high school, students is in the 8th grade formally, not to say they don't start doing career fairs in 6th grade, but formally they begin work on their high school and beyond plan, which is an actual graduation requirement as well. Students are developing a plan to help guide both their 4 years, or actually 8th through 12th would be 5 years of schooling, as well as what they're going to do beyond that. This is a slide that wasn't shown last year, and I chose it because I wanted to really highlight how this plan builds over 5 years, starting in 8th grade. Print is a little tiny, but I want to highlight a couple of things. Students as early as 8th grade is starting the plan, beginning to think about their potential interests and goals. They also, when they are visiting with counselors as the transition to 9th grade, their first very beginning stages of developing what do they see as their 4-year plan based on where they see themselves after high school. That work begins with the high school counselors coming to the middle school. I'm doing this to show coming down to the middle school and starting to meet with them and thinking about where do I see myself when I graduate. You can see it builds over time, not only in the number of bullets, but in what kids are doing. They start a career interest inventory in 9th grade. They update their plan. They start looking and reading about admission pathways for post-secondary. In 10th grade, they're looking at that career interest inventory again and refining it. They're starting to research post-secondary training opportunities. They're looking at what are the assessments I'm going to need to take, SAT, ACT. That work has begun. And then by 11th grade, they are continuing to revise that plan, so it's a work in progress that isn't fixed, and they're continuing to take those assessments. You can see the bullet towards the bottom of researching costs and financial aid. Until 12th grade, they develop a resume, develop their plans for what they're planning to do after high school, or not developing, but refining and then moving on into post-secondary. So it's really a process and a continuum that starts with some early things in kindergarten and then builds all the way to 12th grade. These are some opportunities that you'll see at various opportunities at our middle schools. This happens to be a future night at Inglewood where students are learning about career pathways, 4-year course planning, and preparing for post-secondary. One of the things that we've done, which was an area that needed some standardization, it's similar to what I just was commenting about in my previous presentation about college and the high school. This was one where we had career center specialists pretty much dependent on, first of all, I should say they were at each of the comprehensive high schools. So they're at all 4 of our high schools. And this is an area where they've standardized what it is that they're doing, and so they've got a common focus, and you'll see those highlighted through these titles: college and post-secondary prep, helping students with information on career clusters, pathways and assessments, providing supports, and developing some community connections. The picture on the right shows Juanita's Career Center workshop that they did for students considering post-secondary options. Our Career Center specialists also help with activities such as these. This is a 2018 Kirkland Youth Symposium where Google workers were brought in to talk about what they do, employability skills, and interviewing. This was a spring 2018 opportunity where our Kirkland youth went to Kirkland City Hall and learned about what it takes to work behind the scenes in the infrastructure of the city. This was an engineering and manufacturing night that was sponsored by Lake Washington High School. Actually, you heard Christina talking about this being a focus area for them. This is actually an Insights to Engineering night where over 500 students and their families district-wide attended. And then finally, we wanted to highlight Redmond High School as well, showing a medical careers panel where the various people in health services came to speak with parents and their families. Segueing to career and technical education. Career and technical ed prepares students to be college and career ready by providing core academic skills, employability skills, and technical job-specific skills. These courses and these programs lead to certification, post-secondary certificates and degrees, partnering with businesses to prepare students for tomorrow's workforce. We recently aligned with state changes in how we are organized around our titles for these various programs. So you see the 5 areas starting with human services, business marketing, finance and information technology, agriculture and natural resources, skilled and technical sciences, and then STEM and health science. These programs undergo a 5-year cycle of review and reevaluation. This recently appeared also in EL7. I just wanted to take a portion of it to show the various years across the next 5 years and how each of the 5 will undergo a review. Lots of information on the next few slides that I'm not going to try to read to you. I just wanted to give you a sampling of some of the middle school and high school courses in each of these 5 programs. This first slide shows you a human services program and the courses that are offered in the high schools that are tied to that pathway. The power of silence. Business marketing, finance, and IT. Agriculture and natural resources. Skilled and technical sciences. STEM and health sciences. CTE advisory committees really provide the guidance and helping our teachers develop and review programs on that annual cycle that I just shared with you earlier. We also have program-specific advisories that are for each of those 5 programs, which combines staff and people in industry and business. We have student organizations that I mentioned earlier where students are really applying those skills that they're learning in leadership roles. DECA, Family Career Community Leaders of America, Health Occupations, Technology, and Future Business Leaders of America. Local student leadership opportunities range from, you can see Biotech Expo, all the way through STEM symposiums and fairs. Robotics was highlighted also by Lake Washington High School earlier this evening, and you heard her, as Ms. Thomas explained, the participation that they've been involved in local and regional competitions. Finally, I want to wrap with some information about WANIC, and What that is, especially since I didn't do a very good job last year about explaining it. As I recall, I was stumbling up here. I don't know why I'm even highlighting this. I'm on television saying this, but I couldn't remember all of the districts that were in the consortium, so I wrote them out. WANEC is one of 13 skill centers that provides tuition-free technical and professional training for our high school students. It's also another opportunity for dual credit. We were mentioning that in the previous program presentation. The 8 districts in the consortium include ourselves as the host district, Bellevue, Everett, Issaquah, Mercer Island, North Shore, Riverview, and Snoqualmie Valley. I list them all, and any of our students and any of the programs offered through WANEC can be accessed by anyone. So we actually do have some of our students that access programs in other districts. Those are not high numbers. I thought you might be interested, I was, and I said, well, how many of our students are actually doing that during the school year? Right now, you can first of all see the programs that are offered in various districts. These are in skill centers, programs and courses. We have that automotive right now, we currently have 2 students who are accessing that in the district. The Cisco program that is shown there, we actually have 1 that's currently doing that. Fairly slow numbers, but you have to realize they're traveling now during the day to a different district. That's hard, just getting to WANEC in our own district. So the minute I start looking at how many of our own students are involved in some of those DigiPen courses, now I'm going to animation has 17 right now. Actually, that was animation 1, and animation 2 has 5, so that's a little over 20. Robotics in 2, 4 in robotics 2. The video game design has quite a few, 10, 15, 18, close to 20, 2, 3, 24 students. So I was curious today and was getting a sense of that. We also, what's not shown there is all of the districts offer summer WANEC courses as well. And again, this is the same, that any of our students can access those as being part of the consortium. And there you have our college and career and CTE program presentation.
Just one piece I want to also point out. On the high school and beyond slide that you had,
yes,
at the very bottom of the 10th grade, it said that we provide the universal PSAT for all of our 10th grade students. That's something that the district funds and implemented, Matt, maybe 4 years ago, 5 years ago?
10 years ago.
15 years ago.
No, you're correct.
And so,
It's
but
about-
that really
it's about
is
4 or 5.
to ensure
Yeah.
that all students have the opportunity to take the PSAT, because from the results of the PSAT, students get information about a variety of different areas that help them in their career planning, their course planning, and provides access to other resources as well. So, any questions for Matt?
I would just add that if your student takes the PSAT and lists your email address, the colleges start emailing you when they get their scores. So I would suggest your student give them their own email address. Quick question on what it takes to become a certified CTE educator. What is the cost around that, or the cost of any being able to teach any of these courses in the highly capable world? And I ask that because I have heard on the ground level that it is sometimes difficult for teachers to justify spending the time and the money to become certified in CTE and then be able to offer more of those courses in our schools. I'm wondering, do we help with the cost of any of that? Do we encourage it in any way, getting certified, or?
That's when I want to get more information to be accurate with the questions that are embedded in there, what it takes to be certified, the costs, and how we help with that before I just answer off the fly. That's a great question.
Fair enough. I say anything we can do to encourage that.
Yeah, it's a shame that with all the construction going on in the district, especially at Juanita, that we don't have a construction management CTE classes, because that would be a marvelous learning experience for those kids that want to do it or think they might want to do it. And it's a shame we can't do something like that. Man, that may be the problem.
I wanted to go back and check skilled and technical.
And while you're
That's-
looking at that,
yeah.
Matt, I know I talked to one of the construction companies. I can't remember if it was Juanita or if it was one of the Redmond elementary schools. And they said they've had career centers schedule tours through the work site and take kids through. And I know it's happened at least one time, but it would be a great opportunity for career centers to take kids who might be interested in skilled trades and construction through some of our construction sites on a really nice sunny day.
This is when I also want to follow up on both Mark and Cassandra, just what's the opportunities for construction management interest? That's good.
I think they ought to take them through it on bad days, too. That way they get to feel of alpha and omega as far as what they really want to do.
If I could just expand it just a little further, that's the whole idea of internship, externships, experiences, and that's one component to that. So I guess that would be a bigger issue of looking at what's the program sort of policy and what's the goal going forward with that. Again, sort of ER1, ready for global workplace, same sort of concept of having that opportunity and experience is sort of a real key. So I guess that would be another piece to think about from a bigger.
Thank you.
Anything else for Matt? No, all right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate your taking the time.
Thank you very much.
All right, so next we have the superintendent report. So I will hand it back to John.
Great, and what a appropriate evening to have the health services report on the night that we honor our school nurses with the proclamation from the board. Our school nurses provide a invaluable service to our students, ensuring that their health and medical needs are appropriately cared for at school. And Mike is here to provide us the report on health services.
Thank you. So as I mentioned with our World Languages report, similar to what we shared last year, but some new data and information that I'll also point out as we move through the report tonight. So we'll talk tonight about overall health services in Lake Washington, and then specifically the responsibilities of our school nurses by giving you some examples of some of the areas they have, knowing that they're always responding to lots of different needs in the course of a day or the course of a week, but they also have some very specific things that they attend to as well. So a complex and very important job. So we like to start by giving everyone an overview of the purpose and rationale behind our nurses. Really, it's looking at health and wellness, not only from a response measure, but also to be thinking about how do we attend to things and make sure kids are well throughout the course of their education. So kids do come into the office with emergent needs, but our nurses also do much more than that to make sure our kids are healthy. They work with students in classrooms to promote health and safety. As I mentioned, they intervene when problems do come up, but they're also very much into the educational component, and that's one of the wonderful things about being a school nurse is you get to combine that love and passion for providing services to kids, but also the educational component. And then they also actively collaborate with our families and teachers and school staff and district employees. So again, just a vital role in our system. So our school nurses are overseen by Molly Hutchins, our health services health specialist supervisor, health services specialist supervisor. Fabulous, amazing person if you've met her. Deeply understands the role of school nurses, works with our nurses very well, but also interfaces with our DSS, our school principals, to really help make sure that our services are implemented well. And then we have 20 nurses throughout our district, as we mentioned, that provide services for kiddos. So getting into some of the specific responsibilities they have over the course of the year, one of the most significant is helping to develop and monitor and implement the individual health plans, and we'll give you an example of that through diabetic support tonight. Also vision and hearing screening, and again, as I mentioned, there's an update there that we're excited to share, and then talking about staff and family support and community connections. So As we shared last year, individual health plans are plans that are developed in collaboration with students, families, folks at the school to really attend to health needs of a student. And those can be from day-to-day kind of health needs to pretty severe, significant needs for students. They really are designed to address the medical issues in a formal way by defining roles and responsibility and what happens for a student as they're moving through their school day. And it tells people in the system how to respond. So those are pretty specific to the issues that students have. And so as an example of that, we can talk about a health plan that might be developed for diabetic support. And we actually even have policy language that talks specifically about that. So in this case, as you may know, especially with younger children, we have cases where we're wanting kids to monitor their condition themselves and learn to do that. So that was the education component of that. But also we have young kids. And I remember when I was a principal, a third or fourth grader who is doing a pretty good job most days, but might have some days where she just wasn't quite remembering what the process was. And so we have, for example, places where we'll have glucose monitors where there's a nurse who's connecting with them to help them do that. But we also have places where there's an adult assigned to a student. And that might be someone that is designated by the family and is part of the health plan, or it might be a classified staff member who helps monitor that. So all of those things would be woven into an individualized health plan to help provide that support for a student to attend to their needs and to learn over time. But really, as I mentioned, that first primary thing is to make sure kids are healthy day to day. I also mentioned we'd give an update on vision and hearing screening. So I think last year when we presented, there was new legislation that had just taken effect, but we hadn't implemented for it yet. So now we do near and far-sighted screening using a new tool called the Plus Optics device that measures both, and it does it very efficiently. So I think we pushed it up here. We shared, I think, in a board brief earlier in the year, we've increased the number of students that we've identified as needing potentially additional services or additional screening because the device does a much better job of identifying needs in kids. There's still 30% increase, so it is there. There's still a pretty significant amount of effort that goes into doing that, so we do have a number of volunteers that work in the school to get those screenings done in a way that doesn't disrupt the day, but really does help us to identify needs of kids. And then similarly, we do the same for hearing with an audiometer. So those tests are done in schools with parent volunteers, school nurses, and we try to get all of that done by December so that all students are screened. And the work is to try to get that done in a day. So that's a pretty big task when you think about the size of our schools. And then just a reminder, those are conducted in K1, 2, 3, 5, and 7. So those are, we mentioned some of the direct things that our nurses do for kids directly, but they also help and provide support through other people in the school. So our nurses do an amazing job of providing training for all of our staff members at the beginning of the year, going through things like the health information that our teachers get and how to interpret and what to do with those. They do bloodborne pathogens training. They do defibrillator training, health room services, life-threatening conditions, kind of walk the staff through what they're responsible for and what their roles would be in emergencies so that all the people or the people in our system are prepared to be kind of a second tier of support. And then in addition, they reach out even further. Our nurses connect with healthcare agencies in partnership with families, so with the permission of families, can connect to King County Department of Health, also providing information, kind of a conduit for us for Center for Disease Control. So you may remember a few years ago when we had some outbreaks, they were that connection for us to really think about how do we respond as a school and a district. So that community connection is important directly for individual students, but also for us as a whole system when we're thinking about responding appropriately and making sure we're taking care of the health of our kids. So they do many things. That was a kind of a broad level, but the day-to-day life of a nurse is just really wonderful and complex. And as we mentioned at the beginning, we really do appreciate the services they provide in our district.
And Mike, I just expand a little bit on their connection to the community. Schools, they are the individual within a school system that can interpret and understand the medical needs of students They're reading doctors' notes and responsibilities. They're calling medical professionals to really understand how to implement either an IHP. They're integral parts of student IEP teams when there's medical needs, and so they just play such a valuable role in helping us provide programs for students at school.
Also, Molly was talking to me about some of the services they can provide for low-income families to help them access medical care at lower costs or even sometimes free costs. So that liaison to help families get connected with the health support that they need is really valuable as well.
They're also an integral part of field trips.
Yep.
If you think about going on a
That's for
field
sure.
trip, every
And,
time that inhaler has to be checked out,
yeah.
that nurse has to do that.
And fifth grade camp, and yes.
Any additional questions?
It being 9:52, no.
I actually have one quick one, sorry. Knowing that your referrals increased through the Plus Optics device, my question would be, do we do any follow-up to see if those referrals actually end up being followed through on? Meaning, because I know there's, I mean, if it's needing glasses, there's cost associated with it. So how do we ensure that those,
So there's multiple tiers, and I'll have to go back and look. I think we shared it in the board brief, but we can follow up again. There's multiple tiers that follow after the screening that the nurses are responsible for checking out. So I think what your question is, do we actually have data on how many kids actually end up with eyeglasses, and is there support if kids maybe need it but aren't getting it? So we can
I'd
follow
also
up with data on that.
be interested to know between the near and the far screening, what the difference was
Yeah.
with this addition, because that's a big increase, and that was a legislative sort of
Right.
component. So it'd be interesting to have some data to be able to
Yes.
feed that as
Yeah,
well.
we can definitely do that.
Nancy would have been very excited to hear this update, so.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, any other questions? I think we're okay. All right, well, thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thank you.
That was great. So next is a legislative update. So Eric?
All right, I'll be brief. So WASDA has their annual, the legislative assemblies in September. As of right now, the proposal submission window is closed, but I have it on good authority that if we still have a really good idea, we can submit one. I don't, but if anyone else does, and I'd be happy to circulate, I will circulate the proposals from last year. There's no reason, there's quite a few. My read was, I have nothing new to add. There have been a few proposals from other districts that were sent to us. I've reviewed them. They're, I believe, a little mealy-mouthed and
Don't sugarcoat it, give it to us.
light on the actual legislative content. Nonetheless, would the board like me to circulate those?
No.
Okay.
Yes. Our question is also, on the ones that have already been submitted, do we have a list of the ones that are in the pipeline for this
So-
year?
Yeah, no, the answer is no, not yet, and I was going to get there. I do have the ones, so there's a lot of returning from last year.
Okay.
So I can circulate that. Right now, in June and July, WASDA will review those that were submitted this year. I think it would be, if I'm going to represent the board at the September meeting, the board needs to have a position before then on those. So I know we are
It's August.
stacked up from now until June, but we do have a meeting in August, and if we could have a brief, discussion at our I think it'd be more helpful to be at our study session, with maybe a quick adoption at the business meeting of what we decide. I think we can have a very brief, succinct conversation about what our positions are, and more importantly, what our priorities are, that I can then take to the September meeting. So, any questions as far as process from the board on that?
Real world succinct or lawyer succinct?
I'm very succinct.
Okay.
One of the issues that we might want to think about as we face a teaching shortage, and especially in various areas, the idea that Washington State only accepts credentials from Washington State and Michigan. Not even our neighbors are accepted. So that might be a way to address our shortages. And so we might want to consider something like that.
I believe there's a position on it. currently, so we can look at that to see how it falls. And there's been some legislation prior as well, speaking to it, so that's definitely something to add to it.
Okay, so that's the update. That's what's going forward. Does it sound like August is a,
Yeah, so why don't we have a conversation to figure out exactly what that would be,
Yeah.
how much time, and get an idea of how that will fall out. So
Yeah, thanks.
we will do that next week.
Great.
And so the one other thing I would suggest looking at is consideration right now, Head Start and ECAP for preschool has an income eligibility limit of about 100% or 110% of federal poverty level. Knowing that our low-income children that we look at are 185% of federal poverty level, it would seem reasonable to be able to push that is an income eligibility increase to be able to access those preschool programs. So that could be a legislative resolution to take forward, because that really would help to address some of the incoming needs of our students before we see them.
thank you.
That work?
Yeah,
Okay.
excellent.
Anything else? All right. Any board follow-up to anything? I think I have a whole list of things actually that are incorporated in board follow-up, and we'll be going through the minutes to make sure those happen. If you see something that doesn't quite come through, please let me know, and we'll make sure to get back onto the plate. Any future agenda items that haven't been discussed? All right. Any debrief? Board member comments? Okay. Then lastly, our upcoming board meetings. We do have a special board meeting that's being held on May 10th at 7 p.m. It will be held in the Hughes, and that will be the purpose of discussing the survey and community input and approving the superintendent profile for the superintendent search. It will be very specific to that. On May 14th, the next Monday at 7 p.m., we will have a study session, also on the superintendent search process. On May 21st at 5:30, we'll have our regular scheduled board meeting here in the boardroom, and then follow that with a study session shortly thereafter, doing equity policies and strategic planning budget process. So any other questions? No? All right, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
It has been moved by Director La Liberty and seconded by Director Carlson that we adjourn. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
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 All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.